Zac Posen, how are you?
Doing well.
It is such an exciting moment to be here with you in San Francisco in a very unexpected place. Probably 3 or 4 years ago, maybe it was 5 years ago, the last time we sat down, I never would have predicted that we'd find ourselves here. And there's a whole backstory to that, which we'll get into. But today, as part of this series of special interviews we're doing with our BoF 500 cover stars, we're tracking the careers of all these incredible people at very pivotal moments. And the last 7 months for you here has most certainly been a pivotal moment. Starting in the fashion industry at such a young age, thrust into the media spotlight, building your own business, pulling it back from the brink, closing it down just before COVID. And now you're here. And there's so much to discuss. I wanted to start with the way you think about success. As someone who was thrust into this industry at a very young age and had a lot of attention on you, a lot of expectations, but has now gone through some ups and downs.
Yeah, of course.
When you think about success now, having this experience behind you, what does success look like for you now? How do you define success?
Great question. Well, I'm honored to be here and to be part of this collective and at this incredible moment. I'm so happy that you're actually here to capture this. It's really cool. And what a great question about what is success. I think that through my experiences, ups and downs, great change, professionally, creatively, personally, globally, over the last 25, 30 years, I've watched a lot of change. And definitely because I was thrust so young and also put myself there and put myself forward, success for me is really about being able to be creative. Success is about human connection and about true happiness. And what is true happiness? One is never probably truly always happy, but I have the ability every day to work with incredible people to inspire them. Success for me is about being able to inspire a larger public, to be able to work within my own creativity and to use that in what I represent to help a larger public be in touch with their own creativity. Because to me, creativity is as essential as sleeping and eating and everything else wonderful in life. So that's real true success for me. In the fashion industry, like this idea of what is success, could be when I started, this great anxiety about how a collection was reviewed from, points of view of reviewers or writers that I had great respect for. And then I watched through my career a whole digital evolution or revolution that changed that and who those voices were and players there. Obviously, success gets driven by, how well a collection did seasonally. Or for me, it was always about success was, the completion of like a piece or just working on a construction of a piece obsessively in a more maybe profound but also simple form. But being able to create for me and having that honor is truly success.
Right. So you went back to the very beginning. Before the spotlight and the accolades and the attention and the celebrities and the big shows. And you and I discussed this in our last podcast. And for those of you listening or watching, you can go listen to that podcast because there's a whole history of...
People seem to like that. I think I listened to it a while ago, but I still get feedback from
Well, it's a kind of timeless conversation. But, as I said at the start, like when we finished that conversation, I never imagined we'd be here. So like
that's what's amazing about life.
Yeah.
Like life, career. When my company was closed and my trademark was sold, and I found myself in COVID and lockdown, I didn't know if I wanted to go back into fashion. I mean, I really had to have a step back. I also felt like I got perspective. So I took a step back, and I also got perspective on the industry, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of started to see like what felt priority. And I also felt like I started to see more global perspective
Yeah.
in an interesting way. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, you're not as in it. It's not in the red carpet game because like there's no red carpets, and that's not interesting. I wasn't in a media project runway game. I wasn't in the department store land game. I mean, it was like it's like, oh, like really what matters to me. And it was definitely at that moment less. And I figured out different ways to try to support myself, filming videos, using my social media platform to do collab, sponsorship. I mean, I had to figure it out. And at that point, I agreed to take on my first commission.
Okay.
Within my company closing, with the people that bought my trademark and IP, I was allowed to make one-of-a-kind pieces.
Okay.
And I accepted it. It was like probably a year and a half out, but I knew it was there. And yeah, I kind of was like focusing on getting in as good shape as I could be and strong, as like building a strong core and foundation to then build on. Then around August 2020, I knew that New York Fashion Week was coming up. And so for me, it's like my clock, right? It's like so ingrained in me more than half of my life. Like the clock starts to go.
Yeah.
And, although we were still in lockdown, although it had been opened up, I had come back into the city and I felt the energy of the city. And I had this profound feeling from when I started my brand, which really was a decision that me and my family had to make right in the aftermath of 9/11. And I had a very similar feeling, and I thought, my city needs me. And I took it upon myself and figured out that I wanted to drape within New York City, just for like the sake of it, the sake of creation and just showing creative process. Nothing too calculated. It was actually like really pure in its formation. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it in Central Park. I'm going to like drape in Central Park, and then quickly learned you can't just like set up and drape in Central Park.
In the middle of a pandemic.
In the middle of a pandemic. Yeah. And so I was building these ideas and shapes, but I was back on a mannequin. I was back on a form.
How did that feel?
Great. Warm up. There was warm up time. It's getting my hands nimble and kind of new strength in hands. I think that because I had physical core strength, I actually had different kind of strengths in manipulating and moving material because it is like a dance with a form. I mean, then there's the flat patterning and the perfecting there on the more technical side, but just expressing and sculpting in space, it felt exciting. So I wanted to take it further, and I got in contact with the Parks Department, and I'm pretty sure they let their first, they gave me, the rights to film in Central Park. And I think it was like the first granted filming rights probably, in Central Park during the pandemic. And impromptu was Fashion Week. And I kind of created these, it was around the pond, and it was this, kind of speed draping where I created these just kind of different characters, kind of mythological, kind of angelic, as kind of a love letter to New York. And that was like in and out. And then I think COVID picked up and like lockdown kind of came down. I spent some time here in California, and kind of another recalibration came to Los Angeles and Malibu, and kind of assessing whether another love of mine and another form of storytelling and entertainment and filmmaking and storytelling was going to really be where I was focused. The entertainment community, for me, actually has always been an easier business community and creative community to interact with.
Than fashion.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I don't know. It is what it is. I mean, it is what it is. And always, I think partially because as a young adult, I first went out to Los Angeles for my first trunk show and Oscar weekend in 2002. And it was kind of my first time as a young professional, young adult kid, was able to be living in a city, not as a student in London at St. Martin's, not in my hometown of New York. You know, that was kind of a city and a community that I could form my own identity in. I think probably my love of theatricality, human character, just my love of film. It just works. I love the idea of the magic of dreaming. And that's such a big foundational part of what Hollywood is, right? It's this like self-created idea of self-creation. And that's really cool and powerful, and probably one of America's greatest global contributions. I mean, it changed the world, right? It taught, where we're going to quote Andrew Lloyd Webber here. Okay. Well, I don't know. It's sunset, the new way to dream, right? I mean, it really changed that. And I mean, that leads to other really important cultural figures. Warhol, I mean, is totally, deep into the Hollywood system and, iconography and that blur to art and commerciality and human creation and interpretation.
But despite all of this kind of personal affiliation you had with this industry, I guess at some point you resolved that actually you wanted to go back to fashion.
I was contemplating what it would look like to create a studio within a studio. That's really what I was playing with, right? Was there a place to create a new independent studio to have room for kind of lower budget films with newer talent and directors? Because I felt like there was a void, right? We were still living in that industry and kind of the mega hits. And I have so many friends that are emerging filmmakers and emerging artists and actors that it was just like, where is that? And where's that content to create during this moment when there is space to do it? There I was, and kind of the world had opened up. I had found the love of my life. And that was like this incredible, bizarre epiphany that happened. And, it was like a beginning of a beautiful, of a beautiful life we were going to be building together. And he was at a really Harrison was in an incredible moment in his life and career. At the time, he was at the New York City Ballet. And I would say that the New York City Ballet kind of became my second home. I got Harrison and was so supportive to get him back on stage and kind of re-enter after like a 2-year basically hiatus for him, and seeing the discipline that takes of training. It's pretty unprecedented, and especially with the New York City Ballet. And so I learned that. So I lived in that in what I call the State Theater for a good 2 years. And watched that and definitely learned a lot about movement and form, and simultaneously started taking slowly one-of-a-kind commissions. I started working with one co-collaborator as a draper, and then started to figure out how to make these pieces. I didn't have a place to work. And so I kindly asked my parents and my father if I could work in his studio where I grew up in Soho. I could work with there, so he can work within my working space. He wasn't living there since COVID, and he allowed me to do that. But it's also where I started my company. I mean, when I started my company, it was in my parents' living room. And so I had this whole full circle moment where all of a sudden I'm like alone in a space where I started. I mean, it was like, this is where I'd be as a teenager on weekends, like cutting clothing. And here I am, I just turned 40, and I'm like full circle, like back home, back with like the glue gun that my dad let me like play with at like 4 years old. Like I'm still here, and it felt protected and it felt like safe space.
Mm-hmm.
And it became this kind of creative, for the next 2 years, this very sacred space. And, selectively, to support myself, the projects kind of kept coming. And I was able to create really exciting pieces, some out there in the world that we've seen, and some that, are for private clients, and they remain that. And that's a really beautiful relationship as a designer who does one-of-a-kind pieces, to have that, to fulfill somebody's fantasy when they're making a piece. But it also was very freeing creatively. It wasn't designing into a merch plan. It wasn't confined. It was like, if you're given the opportunity to really express a customer's inner desires and fantasies out, that's a cool medium to be able to play in. And then got commissions from the outside world. I did this dress for Drake for his tour. That was really interesting and like out of left field. Like Drake wants a version of the Claire Danes light up dress, and we're just not getting it. Can you do that? And it has to fly, and he has to sing to it. Or taking, getting asked to attend the Met Gala, and I had a piece in the exhibition, which was a huge honor. And then taking Debbie Harry as my date, and then thinking kind of about what she might mean about American fashion right now, but in a new envisioned way. I mean, I was pretty busy at this point, but I was busy with time.
So at what point were you beginning to think, okay, I'm ready to move out of this kind of experimentation, pure creative phase into like a more structured role? I imagine the Gap wasn't the first place you were thinking about.
So about a year or two into COVID, I started to kind of explore options, other opportunities within fashion. Started having some pretty high-level conversations directly with some brands, and it was an explore. It was still COVID. So it felt a little unknown. It wasn't like people were having runway shows or even, it's like luxury, although, we did see some form of like a boom in some places, still at question. Like the foundationals of like fashion weeks or physical retail even were in question. But it also gave me perspective in looking at luxury and meeting with these brands about my value system. Right? I mean, I was kind of like bringing in value systems about these kind of what-if questions. And these what-if questions were like, what if you can do something at scale? What if you can work with technology and all of the advances in the digital world that are happening? Is there a way to do this responsibly to our planet and our home? Because, I mean, our greatest designer in the world is Mother Nature. Like, she is it. And we're guests for a moment there, and it's all in relation. And I think that putting all those elements together, and even what can a brand be beyond clothing, right? Brands, today we see how they're interacting, becoming either, bigger storytellers, content creators, and how it builds itself and defines. So this is where like my head was at. I don't know if some of the brands that I was meeting with were there yet. And, I put a great deal and all out on the table. Some of them I thought not for me. Few of them I thought this could be really exciting and interesting. Some of them had people in the positions already, so it felt very uncomfortable in terms of conversations. But with anything I do, I give it my all, right? So I felt when I did put work together, I felt very strongly about it. And through that experience and exercise, when it got serious, it kind of made it clear to me, like, and it was like, maybe this isn't for me.
What about it wasn't for you?
It felt too familiar.
Right. So it was more in the line of like luxury.
Yeah, it was luxury.
High end.
For sure. Oh, no. It was like
couture, the whole.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Yeah.
the whole luxury couture world.
Yeah.
And it was exciting, of course, right? And like how to think about how to build that out and where hospitality sits in there and what does the home world look like? And, I mean, very specific. But I had never third party kind of done, kind of a full body checkup of a brand in that way, like real excavation, like going, what is the truest DNA of a brand? Does it actually have deeper meaning to it? Does it really have beyond these few key moments of cultural significance that it also started for me to be reflective about legacy of one's work. We work in an industry that moves so quickly that to create real cultural moments with pieces or pieces that have meaning are fleeting. There's just so much, and there's so many amazing pieces being created by so many incredible creators now. Like, what are those moments that become pieces that stay forever? And it kind of started to feel a little wasteful in a way and unattainable. And I also, through my career, and especially I think within being in media, understood this responsibility to inspire and to interact with a larger population than just luxury fashion talks to.
And so you were already thinking that about that before the Gap?
Yeah, it was there.
Happened?
Living in doing costumes, living in ballet world, and also like kind of, what the fuck am I gonna do?
Yeah.
Like, how am I gonna support myself?
Yeah.
Like, for real, like, whoa, like we've stretched it out, we've gotten here, we're piecing this thing together, watching the love of my life's, creative career, watching him do a retirement. I'm like here, this interim period. And a friend called me and said, what do you think about Old Navy? I'm not sure. Like, what about Old Navy? And what do you think about Gap?
When's the last time you had been into an Old Navy store when you got that call?
Probably as a teenager.
Right. So you hadn't even been in there for
I don't think
20 years or something.
No, I hadn't been in Old Navy, but I'm not, I'm surprisingly not a crazy fashion snob in the sense that like, I go in a Walmart. Like I go high-low, right? I always say like, M&M's to like Maison de Chocolat. Like they're all good. They all have their place and time in my life at least.
Right.
And so I thought, okay, like, do you want to meet, would you be interested in, meeting Richard Dickson, this new CEO? And I thought like, sure, why not? What's there to lose? Like, who knows? And so we set up this meeting. It was just like very casual, kind of have a coffee or a tea or a drink. Turned out French fries in a corner table at Balthazar. It was on my birthday. And I had also chosen pretty impromptu to actually celebrate my birthday, which I hadn't done probably in like 2 decades, consecutively after this random just meeting. I was meeting people. And, in walked Richard. He walked in, he had this kind of, I'd say a cross between like rock star and this kind of elegant Jewish Kennedy thing happening. Walked in and a kind of cool regality and eccentricity. And then he sat down.
Basically not your typical like business executive.
Different kind of business executive. Walked in and he sat down. And we started talking about what he was doing here and brand new at Gap Inc. and what he was dreaming. And he asked me kind of where I was at in my career. And it started to become these questions. Well, these are where my values sit. And he's like, well, these are where my values sit. And within 5 minutes, I knew that there was something very special. It was a kismic moment where there was like a magic connection where I saw that I had met my dreamer.
And is part of what made you aware of that in such a split-second moment the fact that you'd had this time to step back, that you'd had this time to reflect on things, that you'd had this time to kind of reprioritize. So you had clarity about what those values are and you were able to articulate them to someone else.
Probably, yeah. It had a lot of time to have that breath of
Yeah.
a moment or a beat. I can't say for sure,
Yeah.
but I would imagine so. Yeah. I mean, I had gone down building a digital couture house,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I'd gone through all different kind of concepts. While it'd be draping, we'd be building business plans,
Yeah.
you know, in the NFT space. Like, it was like, here's what's happening. But then realizing, like, I don't want to learn personally how to program on Clo.
Yeah.
I'm happy to work with Clo, and here at Gap Inc., I'm working with Clo every day
Yeah.
with my teams. But, you know, I like went down all these paths. I was like, this is somebody who's seeing the future that I see.
And so what did he say to you in that meeting, Zac, that about what he wanted
Well,
to bring to these four incredible brands here that, you know, all of which need a refresh and a reset?
Well, there was two things. He was very aware of, you know, and open about where, and the world was open to know about where Gap Inc. Had been and its history. And he needed somebody to bring creative wind into this company, and as a force of believing in the power of creativity and working to build that out within each brand. We were formulating as we were speaking. We were saying, like, what if, why not? Like, what is this about? Well, the purpose of what we're doing, hopefully, is to build a better world. You know, we bridge the gaps to build a better world. And that's kind of where we came to in this idea. And obviously there were foundations. If we're going to go into the future, we better be, you know, obviously always customer focused, obsessed. Like, no, this is not about like the runway. This is about like customer focused. This is about how we communicate our storytelling and the extensions of what storytelling can be beyond just a denim shirt or a pair of jeans or a dress.
So was that fundamentally what was missing? This idea that, you know, the Gap, Old Navy, Banana Republic, Athleta, these all have become like, what these brands needed was, you know, they were already fixtures in the American retail landscape, but the kind of magic was missing. And the magic comes from the storytelling that's infused in kind of these brands. When Richard sat on stage last year at Voices, for example, we watched some of those amazing commercials that were made with the khakis and the denim and all the dance. And so, like, in a way, you had been looking at this like Hollywood opportunity, but part of what your remit here at the Gap was to bring some of that storytelling into this business.
What was clear to Richard and I is that this is, you know, building a brand is about being part of the cultural conversation and moving at the speed of culture and actually being able to help move culture forward.
Right.
So that was the goal, and it was very clear that, you know, he was clear Gap, you know, was, you know, was a beautiful canvas for creativity. Right, and it was about expression of human character. And I grew up with the iconic Gap portraits and you know, swing ads and khaki ads and all of them. Like, they were part of the cultural conversation. And throughout my career, you know, I had had moments where I interacted in the cultural conversation. Like, that was a big driver for me. Like, some people had those New York Fashion Weeks. For me, it was our cultural calendar that I always, you know, created and built with my teams. And that was interesting, as well as Fashion Week, of course. But it was like that continual conversation that you can shape and change culture through one's creative work or brand building. And, you know, I thought, we were looking at the whole portfolio. I mean, Power of She, women's empowerment, celebrations of form, body, and health, like, totally cool. I mean, you know, I had questions like whether it was, you know, why can't we add men's in there, or, you know, and we're like, okay, we'll keep it to women's there. Banana Republic was like, and is to me, this incredible opportunity as the dark horse of our brands. It also is a storyteller, and over the past few months, we've kind of focused it on the idea of the modern explorer That's what is this, to redefine what this is and back to its original roots. It's about exploration. And how does that tap into contemporary social media and kind of this desire we have about all traveling the world, exploring, learning, nurturement, with humor in there as well. And Old Navy was like this huge behemoth opportunity. I had no idea of the scale of it. And it was just like broken down to me, right? It was like, this is what it is. And I would like you to take the helm of this brand creatively. It's a big organization. It's been through a lot. There's building blocks to do there. But what an amazing opportunity. I had no idea. I mean, the stats are just there, and I think it was like unknown.
And also, unlike maybe some of those opportunities you were looking at in Paris, a real challenge, a really different context, a completely new way of channeling your skills towards solving a different kind of creative problem.
Yeah, I mean, we were eating French fries, and it came very clear to me in this moment. I said, and we were forming the job. It wasn't like this is the job. I mean, it was a back and forth and a really open conversation. Like, what are your goals? What are your dreams? I was like, I want to have a family one day, and I want to use all of my skill sets. And that came to it. It was like, I want to, I said, I don't think actually necessarily, even though it's my like secret sauce in draping and forming, that it's actually probably the best use of my skill sets. And I have a lot of energy and a lot to give to inspire a larger country of Gap Inc. here.
Yeah.
And that's how that kind of came to be. And 1 week later, I flew here for a follow-up secret meeting. It was like through an elevator shaft.
In the cloak of darkness.
Kind of in the cloak of darkness. I think like one person clocked me. Of course, the one person who clocked me, like passing through an elevator, happened to like work, was like the sister of like somebody who's a close friend of mine and also like produced all my fashion shows for years. So like that came back really quick. And I met with Io, our CEO of Old Navy, and I met with Amy, who is our head of people, who was about to join as well, and had a great meeting with Richard. I was like, okay, this is getting exciting. I'm interested, I'm intrigued. And we started, to kind of formulate what the role that he had in mind. Richard and I were kind of building this role. I think like the mother goose in me felt that there was a real need and a new role to build, to nurture and work alongside him together across all the brands.
A business partner.
Like a business partner. Yeah. I knew it in that moment. I mean, as I said, it was kismic in that moment. I felt it through. I left those French fries heading down to my impromptu birthday party on the Lower East Side, and all of my community and my friends, they knew. They just saw it on my face. They said something happened. They're like, there's a sparkle in your eye. There's like a pep in your step. Something exciting is happening. I'd kind of gone over the hump of, of the rebuild, of the mourning of a closure of a family and a company. But I was ready to join a larger family. And, I call Gap Inc. a country. It's a large population of creatives. That creativity needed to be unleashed. I needed to be a creative partner to Richard as he so carefully and creatively looked at this business and meticulously kind of was rebuilding it. And I was like, I can be a partner to you in this. 4 days later, after a few Zooms with Richard, he's like, I think I need to get you back on the plane. I want to get this moving. Can you come out here? It's our board presentation and the board wants to meet you. They have their concerns and we're a public company and that's going to be important in such a big role as a creative director of Gap Inc. and my creative partner in this journey. So, okay. And I got on a plane and I walked, they finished a board session. They walked out of the boardroom. here in San Francisco, and they did like a fire round. Each one of them got like their time to just shoot fire round questions about how I saw the industry, how I saw tech working with the company, each brand, where I saw opportunity.
What was the toughest question that you got asked that day?
I'm trying to remember. I'm sure it was probably like a AI question, digital transformation question. I can't remember actually what the tough. They were all tough, but it was kind of on point, and just them understanding, I think, that I wasn't like a Mugatu or some crazy idea, some out there designer, that I was gonna really roll up my sleeves.
Yeah, you
here.
were grounded enough to come in here and do the hard
Not
work.
a figurehead.
Right.
Like, it's just, and that was a very clear distinction with Richard when I met him. I said, in my career, I've had many different hats. A lot of times for different licensing partners and different kind of other situations where I had to be a public face or a caricature in a way, to some degree, was Mickey Mouse, right? It was like I was a face for brands and had to do that. I said, I don't want to just be a figurehead here. Like, that's just not interesting to me. In fact, I'd rather actually be more hands-on in the work and building this, and whatever you need from me in that perspective, I'm fine to do it. It's easier for me. I'm experienced in that. But I want to be in the work and really hands-on holistically with the teams building each brand, from overseeing the product first, working on the marketing, retail, experience, and extensions as we build this incredible Gap Inc. umbrella, and what that means. What does Gap Inc. mean? And so then it all worked out. Crazy time in my life. About 6 months before that, my mom got diagnosed with a very intense cancer. And so I was living that through the negotiation of this. Final stage of negotiation, were even more self-questioning. It was like a final test. I mean, obviously my mom was really sick. She was in the hospital. And I was, in rural Pennsylvania doing like negotiation final calls, trying to reach Richard. My mom's there, like unconscious. It was really crazy. So it really, really forced a question like,
do I really
want this? Is this really the commitment that you're going to make? And that this is going to be a marathon. This is about being a long distance runner. This is, not a quick sprint.
Right.
And, Richard, are you going to be patient? Because this takes time. Like, I've built a brand. I've rebuilt the brand. These have even kind of greater opportunities and also deeper roots that are going to make it harder too. And how can we take each one of these, assess our talent inside of each one of these, grow the talent inside, bring in exciting people, just like turn it up with each one. And then, once we have like the strong foundation, where we build from there.
So when you arrived here, what did you find? As you started to, there's so much history in this brand. There's so...
Each one.
Yeah.
Each one. Deep.
But let's start with the Gap, because it's the one I think that's in the forefront of so many people's minds when they think about this company. It's just like the archive of imagery and designs and history here. Like, what did you discover here that you...
I opened the vertical files and started seeing the original prints of all the iconic Gap ads. It was amazing. There are rows and the contact sheets. So it's not just the final image there.
It's like Annie Leibovitz.
Oh, it's Annie, it's Steven, DeMarchelier, Herb Ritz. You name it.
Wow.
The collective there, but also all of these incredible icons, some friends, some unknowns, just that have been part of the history of Gap. My own personal history of it. I grew up, I went to school on Bleecker Street. Across was one of the earliest themed Banana Republic stores. Right up the block on 6th Avenue for a long time of the Village was Gap, the Gap Kids and the original Gap. I wore probably got on sale, but I definitely wore like, the pocket tee, like all these elements there, and
Yeah.
realizing, I was looking at Gap brand, I was like, well, these staple pieces, not only are these as fabulous as like, your eggs and milk, which is so fabulous. I mean, each one of these are icons in themselves.
So
Gap brand itself is the star. I mean, there's a modernity and an elegance to the brand that are timeless, and like that's very rare.
So where did, in your diagnosis, in having arrived here and looked at everything, where do you think Gap lost its way? Like, how did it lose its relevance in the cultural conversation? Its relevance as like one of the high street brands or retailers that everyone would go to. Its relevance as a business. Like, what was missing? What went wrong?
Well, I think that the changing landscape, and I think Gap had a formula and it didn't evolve. And I think that to build a business, there were choices made with best intention and business intention, I imagine, as well, that really made it, purely kind of just merchant. And you need to be kind of, you can't only be merchant-led. There has to be a balance between brand-led and merchant-led. And that has to have a healthy balance. Like, they have
And so that balance was out of whack.
I think that balance was out of whack. I think the retail model had gone stagnant. I think...
what do you mean by that?
Well, I think there hadn't been a real strong update to the identity. I mean, when Gap went through its different reinventions, they were game-changing inventions that changed the face of retail. I mean, historically, even famously, like overnight, to surprise the consumer. And that's really cool. That means it was moving culture. It hadn't moved culture a long time. And then to be very fair for the living brand, because I think each brand is alive, like they're actually living beings and creatures, like Shinto, about brands themselves by the many people there, was that the landscape had changed. Fast fashion had entered fashion, direct to consumer had entered fashion. The whole landscape had become filled, and competitors came in really strong and took market share. And they had lost a generation. I mean, we literally have a jump skip, right? I mean, I'm born in 1980. My generation of friends and fans now are getting like reintroduced to the Gap. And then it's like, but a lot of my friends have like young adult children now, right? And they didn't grow up with it in the same way.
Right.
And so it's like, how do we reintroduce that generation into it now and kind of get the next generation part of that excitement? And it's like that new generation of consumer, which we don't want to lose our existing consumer. How do you get that new consumer reinvigorated? The existing consumer, we're not going to take her product or his or hers or them's project away, but we're going to make them feel cool again. They should have a reason to be here.
So talk to me about, like, say you're sitting down with one of these like young adult children of your friends, and you're trying to explain to them what the Gap, the new Gap, led by you and Richard, stands for. Like, what is this new Gap?
It is a canvas for creativity. It's a self-expression brand, and it's a brand that allows you, through its classic pieces, to have human expression and character. That's what those iconic portraits were. That's what those ads were. Those were pure kind of joy and expression and a celebration of life.
So when we see Divine walking the Met Gala steps in that incredible denim structured gown, similar to the kinds of gowns that you would have created back in the day, but in a completely Gap material. That is a form of this self-expression that you're talking about.
Absolutely. She absolutely represents everything about this brand. She's an artist. She has honed her craft. And I wanted to celebrate her.
Yeah.
It was like time to celebrate this incredible artist. So Divine was this incredible kind of moment. I mean, I had been here for a few months, so it's really in the inner workings of looking at Old Navy and our processes of working here. I mean, it was like the integration into all the processes here are nothing to joke about. I mean, this is a very corporate culture, but it's also a creative culture, and processes here have also been created themselves. And there's processes that need to go. There's processes that we need to like refine, processes we need to like adhere to that are great.
And probably new processes you need to put in place.
And new processes we're making.
Yeah.
And it's just like taking it all in at every level. I have never worked more intensely or harder in my life. I am so in it on a daily basis with such joy and love, and bringing that energy every day to each brand and all my brand heads and creatives is so important to me. It's a lot.
It couldn't be more different than what you did before, not just in terms of market positioning, but just in terms of sheer scale.
Sure,
So, like,
the scale is
how
here.
do you manage
the
it?
fundamentals, though, are very similar.
Right.
I know that sounds crazy to think,
Yeah.
but actually, I mean, business fundamentals of, kind of your budget, you make something, you hopefully make a profit on it, you can make it up through volume, you hope you ship it on time, and you hope you sell it at full price. I mean, those are the fundamentals.
And that's true at the high end and the low end of the market.
Totally, absolutely. Like whatever scale it is, there's a margin, there's a profit, you hope you can sell through the product. I mean that's the system. We're selling a world and dreams, but we're also, selling pieces that are made and designed. It's behemoth. It's nonstop. Richard and I are passionate and driven and relentless and take challenges face on daily and celebrate our successes as well. At this scale, you can get in the weeds and get very detailed. And I care about every detail.
Right.
I'm meticulous. And, I could spend hours on like a window, just, I could spend a week on a window if I could.
But you can't afford to do that.
You can't afford to do that. So you have to bring in the people. You can't be flip-floppy. You kind of have to like, part of it is just you want to make the right decision, but maybe sometimes you're not. And sometimes the right decision is actually just owning it. And sticking to that plan and then supporting the teams.
So 7 months in, the last couple of earnings results have been really, positive. Market's receiving it well, stock price is up. But from your perspective, leaving the business metrics aside, what is the key progress you've made thus far here at The Gap? What are the things, and obviously Old Navy and Banana and Athletic, what are the things you're most proud of so far that show that you're making progress against this goal to bring these brands back into cultural relevance?
Well, we're in the cultural conversation. So let's start there. We're in the room, right? So for me, business aside, creatively, each brand has its voice. And we've defined each brand's voice. And so you have the tone of voice, and then you have the brand identity. And I was able to, for most of the brands, work with the teams in refining, defining, and getting past their corporate and brand identity voice. And that's really important. Like once you have those
Old
foundations,
Navy is different from The Gap, how?
Totally. And I just want to say, 7 months into it, I am literally like, I don't even think it's a scratch on the surface.
Right.
I'm really at the foundational beginnings of this. I hope that I'm learning just as a human till like my last day on this planet. Like that's the goal, right? Keep your ears open and be open to learning and being able to teach and be, hopefully I can have that dialogue. But I feel like each brand has a much clearer direction and kind of guardrails of what works in here, what doesn't. So Old Navy being our largest brand, second largest apparel brand in North America.
After Nike. Mind-boggling.
The stats are wild.
Yeah, mind-boggling.
What that takes to make those stats is one of the most impressive, incredible leadership teams, the most impressive leadership teams I've ever worked with, bar none. They blow my mind every day. Like, I'm in awe of them. I took this job. I was like, what did you do before? I did customer segmentations for a decade at Starbucks. Here are the analytics. So, from there and, this, and then Io's experience at Walmart. I mean, these are really strategic, smart business people. They're all good people. And that's really cool. And it is a community and family, and all the challenges, celebrations that happen with a family. But where I'm at today, I feel like we're just at the beginning. But the plane has left the gate. We are ascending. So we're in the sky.
Just taking off.
We're in the sky. We're like, we've come there, right? We're leaving there, and it's like, we're here. We're like starting there. And we're out, we're all working together, acclimating to a new force and energy that we bring in. I'm deeply proud of the work that we've done and the brand purposes on the Gap Inc. level, which we'll share with you, which are really powerful. And it goes down where each one of them foundationally attaches to a brand. That's the first work I did here. First work, I was in a boardroom with empty Post-its with like a whole team of brand presidents and CEOs and our senior leadership of the whole corporation. And I was like, what do we stand for? Who are we? And it was kind of everything you imagine in like slightly esoteric California comedy mode, right? It's like, what's going to happen now? Is it like, corporate Twister, like bonding, exercising there? But it was really great because I got to learn kind of starting to learn how everybody thought, and also what was needed in the company, like what was missing. And then from there, it started to go into every brand, and first and foremost with Old Navy as the largest in our portfolio, working on the brand reinvention. And I came in and I started to hear it, and I had to like have this moment where I was like, everybody, like, Richard, I think you should come listen to this. Like, we need to listen to what's happening here, because there was a lot of analytics. They were very intense. I mean, I just say it was this moment like, oh my gosh, did I make the right choice? This is rough. It was hard. It felt depressing and sad. And I was like, no. We are able to provide something so special and rare for such a large population. This really, truly ties into the power of what good clothing and fashion can be, that is accessible to everybody. And that democratization of style or fashion was like the world's greatest opportunity. And then a brand that had such irreverence and humor and changed the game in the marketing and kind of balanced this idea of fantasy and dream to iconic pop culture moments, surprise moments, into its marketing, and also was a leader also in changing the face of retail. I mean, they had shopping carts originally, right? It like was that first grab and go, was just huge. And I said, we need to look at this brand through a different lens. Like, it was like we were working with an incredible company called Collins. They'd done all this research, and we'd focused that there was like the thrifty, it was like a thrifty shopper. Then there was like the on-trend seeker that would find it. There's like the different elements there. And we worked really together with my head of design, Sarah Holmes, Brad, who's our head of merchandising, Banaz, our CMO at Old Navy, and Io. And then at moments we'd bring senior leadership and Richard and the rest of the larger team in just from Old Navy. And we came up with this concept of, we invite you to come play with style. Very simple. And each word with specific meaning. And then we started to work like a sculptor or in an operation to basically take what we have and evolve it. I don't think it's a reinvention. I don't think it should be. I think that would be a disservice to a brand and its beauty of its identity, and a large business, very responsible for every decision made. How do you slightly evolve it so that people don't even notice the evolution that's going to happen? And we started to work on a new brand identity, which we're still in the process of, starting to slightly evolve a logo. How do you modernize everything, make it more competitive, but also more contemporary, approachable? I mean, every little detail from font, every brand, including Old Navy, its own color identity system, like having a full physical of each brand, like, your body scanning everything here and working with research from the outside world, from perspectives, from the Gap lifers that are here, that are attached to each one of these iconic American brands, to refocus it and make it ready for its next stage into the future.
I wanted to conclude with some advice for young people who are listening to or watching this interview, trying to navigate their creative careers in this industry, which, as you've noted, has irreversibly changed over the last 15, 20 years. What's your advice to someone who's looking to find their way in today? What's important for them to think about?
Great question. I can kind of get emotional about that because I have such deep care and love for young creators, and in the sense of like what they're entering into. This is a wild theme park called fashion. In this industry, it's changed a lot. My advice for emerging creators entering the fashion world is to know that creativity is a lifelong pursuit. This is a long journey. You just can't ever expect to know where that path is going to take you. Know that this is a full life choice of a commitment. It's about being a long distance runner. You can't foresee the path and where it will take you, but every day know that if you are able to work in this industry, to be able to work in a creative field that is art and commerce, and understanding that a fabulous, amazing, magical pendulum that has to be in balance, you are so lucky and so fortunate every day. And as trying and tiring and challenging as this career and business can be, you have an opportunity to make this world a little bit more beautiful and to inspire somebody every day through what is inside you, and then put it on to somebody. And that is such a gift. But whenever it's hard, just remind yourself, how lucky you are to be able to do that. I would also say for young creators, respect business. This is a business. You can choose to be a pure artist, and all respect to that. You can find your own path. There's no rules about that. Like, you could make one piece a year, and if that piece has that value and that's what you need to support to make the next piece, then that's amazing, and that's what it's about. But if you're going to be in a marketplace and put your creativity and work and expression, or just point of view, maybe it's just like you like the style and attitude of something, and that's what your point of view is, and that's really valid and important too, that it's lasting. I mean, these pieces, things don't just disappear or evaporate. You're making something and putting it out there. That's responsibility. You're not going to be able to control everything, as much as you'd want to, as much as I like to every minute. Like, you have to be bigger picture of it, as hands-on at the same time. And it's just finding that ability to parlay that. If you are going to be the face of your company, I tell a lot of emerging talent that, like, understand where you stand in that. I think that I see young creators often, get overwhelmed or confused about it, but understand that in some form or fashion, you are living your brand and you are the face of your brand. And maybe sometimes the face of your brand is being incognito, Mr. Margiela. Like, you have those choices. But in today's world, where people are so interested in the creator behind, social media is so human brand character driven, you have to be really clear on how you're going to interact into the world. And if you want to get something to a larger scale and it's your own brand under your own name, you're going to be on that journey with it. And, know where your skill sets are and where your comfort level is. But most likely you are going to have to be the face of your brand. And you have to get comfortable with that. I mean, in my career in the past, that I was able to see behind the scenes, into places and people that I never would have ever imagined. And and I feel like I'm at like a next chapter and really just at the beginning of it. And I feel that with Richard and I really met my man in that sense, my businessman in that sense. And he is a incredible and sensitive and strategic leader and a force. Even in the 7 months that I've been here, I've seen, and with all his career and his experiences, I've seen his growth, and it's a really beautiful thing to witness and watch, like with pride and joy. I mean, I feel this way I feel about him, watching him on stage give a presentation and seeing that evolve. And he's so amazing at presenting and his leadership. In the same way, I feel really proud of my design leads, my creative leads in my company, when we complete a store and knowing all the teams that go together with it, being able to talk to the people that are doing like the visual display in a store and knowing what that is. Like every element of that represents a part of us. And it's pretty powerful every day, and a lot of responsibility, a lot of future dreaming to do. It's exhilarating, exciting, and I'm really excited about the future of Gap Inc.
Well, I am equally excited and grateful for the time we spent together.
Thanks.
And everyone should like watch this space, because I think, as Zac says, this is the beginning of the comeback kid at the comeback brand. So congratulations.
Yeah.